Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Let's talk about some alts today on the Wednesday rotation. The 4 things that matter the most for alts: interest rates, regulations, spot Bitcoin ETF, and Bitcoin halving. Because ultimately, it comes down to liquidity. Without liquidity, there is really nothing in the system. One way to measure that is stablecoins, which flows have been flat and boring. The good news for alts is that the attention and eyeballs and fanfare on the Bitcoin side of things is approaching quite quickly here. Now we may see another R word, recession, soon in Q1 or Q2 2024, which certainly won't help alts. But at that point, we may see things that finally look bad enough to buy, at least on the charts that I'm looking at. On the regulatory front, though, things are looking not so great because we kind of keep getting thrown this junk like, oh, crypto is for criminals and rapists and terrorists, and oh, we're funding Hamas and all this other junk, which is completely garbage and nonsense. There was this article in the Wall Street Journal citing Elliptic Data, which is another chain analysis firm who loves to absolutely hate crypto, which is fine. Have your opinion, but have solid evidence to back it up. Nick Carter's been all over this talking about it. They came out today with a retraction effectively. On the elliptic side, we'll see what Wall Street Journal actually says, but the damage kind of already has been done. We've got, senators upset. We've got other articles and other publications sort of spreading the news and the narrative, as it were, and this leads to more regulations as opposed to a looser regulatory environment. Stablecoins, probably the most easy, lowest hanging fruit, still lack regulatory clarity in the United States. That could certainly help flows and help things get sorted. We've got across the pond in the UK, all sorts of not so great things for DeFi, especially. This is just pointing out a specific DeFi protocol quitting the UK. And if things were truly decentralized, then you can't really quit, a market. You can't really geofence, but DeFi is kind of decentralized in name only in certain parts. But anyway, I think it's going to take some time for alts to surge like they did in 2020 and 2021. And, we've got our own problems here in the United States with the IRS coming after us, really trying to kill DeFi. So look, maybe we'll have this permission pool system where people will be on chain, but they will be KYC'd. It won't be perfect, but it'll be something. Will alts do well? Maybe. I don't know, but it's globally regulations aren't getting any easier. We're still dealing with basically fake news as well as the ghosts of 2022 when it comes to fighting the last war, the classic regulatory problem. And, here's the one, Elizabeth Warren, right, uses Hamas as her newest scapegoat in war on crypto. So it's kind of never ending, but it is often darkest before dawn. And certainly on the regulatory front, it won't get any easier anytime super soon. Before we get into the charts, let me mention today's video sponsor, Kraken Pro. Kraken Pro is a complete overhaul of the Kraken trading experience with a one-stop shop for advanced and professional traders. Kraken Pro enables efficient trading execution across multiple markets with a UI that allows for unique optimization tailored to your trading style. You can check out Kraken Pro with the link in the description of this video. Bitcoin's done well, held well in the face of legacy really melting down. I think it's got a little bit of a ways to go, potentially just based on some vanilla fib targets. It's good to see volumes pick up pretty significantly, kind of across the board on alts, whatever your feelings may be. At least we have some life back into the market at the very least. And Link still doing quite well after a bit of a retrace. But, we look at the top 100, let's say, the first thing that pops out to me is ETH, love it or hate it, it's got competition, and who's going to compete with ETH? Again, I'm no fan of either network, Solana or ETH, but Solana relative to ETH, certainly something to watch in the next cycle, how this gap closes, if it closes, how much it closes, that sort of thing. Binance and Ripple are sort of their own beasts. Binance has tons of regulatory baggage. Cardano is not really a competitor here in my eyes. Obviously, neither is Doge, neither is Tron. Link is an ERC20. Polygon is scaling. Dot's another layer 1 that doesn't really compete, right? So there's nobody really in the top 20 conservatively that can even compete with ETH. I mean, maybe you could argue Avalanche, but I don't think so. Maybe you could argue Cosmos. But anyway, just sort of long-term positioning and relative value still an interesting consideration, because ETH BTC continues to look from bad to worse, which I'll get to in a second. Looking at the stablecoin stuff, USDC continues to nose it down a little bit. USDT pretty much flat. So we're not really seeing inflows. We're not seeing, again, USDC is a proxy for US DeFi demand, let's say, and we're not seeing it. So I wouldn't expect TVLs to be rising. I wouldn't expect DeFi anything to be rising per se here. Bitcoin dominance continues to rise, nearing its weekly edge-to-edge target on the cloud there. Maybe you start considering alts when this is above 57%. Maybe, right? Now people have chirped at me that, oh, you should take out the stable coins. You can do whatever you want, right? This is just a metric that's easy to pull up on TradingView, okay? Nothing's perfect. I'm not going to disagree. Nevertheless, this still shows, whatever the number is, it says clearly the strength is on Bitcoin's side here, on Bitcoin's favor. Don't expect alts to do super well. And that's fine. Again, this is what you want. If you're doing the right thing based on where the market is at. The market is clearly favoring Bitcoin, has for quite some time. Don't expect a miracle on some relative value trade here, okay? And we can look at that in a few different ways. This is total 3, so it's all of crypto minus Bitcoin minus ETH, just the alts, minus stables, minus wrapped Bitcoin, right? Try to pull out as much non-alt type stuff we can. Still ranging, still not exactly bullish, right? Maybe Adam and Eve, maybe miniature inverted head and shoulders. On a USD value basis, Bitcoin has pulled this up, right? Again, Bitcoin halving is important. The spot Bitcoin ETF is important. Just from a relative value perspective, eventually there will be rotations. Eventually. But collectively, right now, only a few things are doing particularly well on the alt side of things. Alts may start to outperform, I have a hard time even saying it, when we are above 300 billion or whatever this is on the market cap side of things. We're probably at that point above 57% on dominance as well, right? And you can also look at total 2 minus stables. You know, you can make whatever metric you want. Total 3 is everything minus Bitcoin and ETH. Total 2 is everything minus Bitcoin. So if we make sort of a pseudo alt BTC index and we look at where support could be, right? We can go all the way down here, whatever this value is on this chart. It's kind of the inverse of, you know, dominance, right? So we can look for support to rotate into alts. We can look for breaking this support to rotate into alts. We can look for breaking this resistance to rotate into alts. But generally right now, alts probably not the move, as you're continually reminded every day here with the underperformance relative to Bitcoin. And on ETH's side, we're back above the daily cloud-ish. So the cloud says, now's the time to start thinking about Ethereum, finally, right? Just based on the USD chart. 1990 is, to me, a more important level, but once we get above the cloud flips, right? Then trend is saying, okay, now's an okay time. No bear div just yet, but I do like eventually, I don't know when, but eventually 1990 to 3100, just a pivot to pivot trade down the road. Typically how I play these is I pick and choose my battles on the USD side of things with leverage. Ideally, you use BTC as collateral, right? You're denominating in BTC and you're trading the USD pair. Kind of confusing, but if you're looking for specific setups like Solana, which I'll get to in a second, in trading that on leverage, to me, you know, that's a way to sort of catch up with the BTC strength while you're trading alts. If you're just sitting in alts, you're just bleeding value, right? Anyway, on the cloud, we look good. And on ETH's weekly cloud, still going to be some time, you know, maybe closer into post Bitcoin halving Q2 2024. ETH does best at the beginning of the year, the first half of the year historically. So that would make sense. Again, somewhere to 2850 or 3,100. That's a perfect level. It's a great trade. That's a great setup down the road to take. You know, a lot of people see this and start positioning right now. I think it's a little too early for that. Definitely something to watch down the road. And just as it was written up here, ETH BTC diving rather significantly relative to where it's been over the past several months, certainly coming up at a multi-year low. And if you are an ETH BTC bull, you're really hoping that this recent, not recent, but June 22 low holds, because otherwise there's really not much left until 035, let's say, 037, whatever it is. So at this point, it's a successful edge-to-edge move through the cloud, which I don't know if I've ever necessarily said on this chart, but that's what it was, right? And now you're losing yearly pivots. You're entering real bearish momentum territory. Still no bull div on this, right? Down the road, probably months from now, we will get an established bull div. The Bitcoin maxis will be celebrating. That's probably when we see this turnaround. I don't know how low it gets, if it necessarily goes to 04, but definitely something to watch for down the road. Would I be buying this here? No, I would not. I would not. I'd be standing out of the way, just letting it die, because that's what it looks like it wants to do. And against Solana, we have broken out of a ascending triangle. We're above a high time frame cloud. From a relative value perspective, it looks like Solana is ready to continue to gain against ETH. This may change, but right now, this is what the chart likes. The chart likes a bullish Solana relative to ETH. So again, I think when people are looking at these market caps and they're thinking, maybe Solana is undervalued relative to ETH, you know, if you're trading layer 1 DeFi coins or something. I don't think the Bitcoin crowd, for the most part, dips into the layer 1 side of things for the most part on aggregate, but I think the layer 1 DeFi crowd certainly does. And they may be looking at these market caps thinking, well, there's somewhat of an imbalance there, right? It's just something to consider. Something else to consider on the legacy side, there are still products with over 30% discounts. This is GDLC. It had a multi-month inverted head and shoulders that looks to finally have broken through the weekly cloud here. Looks like it wants more, looks like it wants to fill the gap. It's a weekly edge to edge. I don't know if it goes to 38, but it does have a massive discount. It does have Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, ADA, and Matic, right? Doesn't have Link. Nobody's perfect. I'm kidding. But if you're on the legacy side with legacy money, you know, looking for alt exposure, this is one way you could get it in products that still have a discount, that are still kind of skewed towards Bitcoin, right? Anyway, just something to consider. This is BitW, again, another one. This is a 36% discount. Also looks good, moving through a high time frame cloud, looking to fill the gap. No promise that these discounts close completely, but they do have alt stuff in them, you know, that may pop up on radar for legacy people if they are also looking for altcoin exposure for whatever reason, you know. So just something to consider. And then as far as the winners, there haven't been that many, obviously, but Maker, over the past few weeks, I've kind of said, look, I think it's basically to its target, which it's pulled back a little bit here. It's got a bear div. It was the first mover, moved before everything else. So to me, I think this chart is done in the moment relative to everything else on the alt side of things. Link's still showing strength, 12 to 14, whatever it is, looks possible. 850 to 950 would be a key retracement level. You know, this may just make a massive flag eventually. Just something to watch for if it doesn't hit that 12 to 14 level by the end of the year. I think you'd have people stepping in at that 850 to 950 level. And Link also on the weekly is in its weekly cloud. So there's no guarantee, right, that we hit the other edge of this cloud. There's no guarantee it's not a bumpy ride. It may drop all the way down to 750 and then go again. Who knows, right? But it does say a mean reversion attempt is in the making here. And you don't necessarily need the cloud to tell you that, but it does help for me to see that visually. So that's good news for Link. For Solana, on the USD side, it is approaching its take profit zone. Still looks okay. 25 is probably the neckline where buyers would step back in earnest. But as far as a long-term cycle play, for me on the spot side of things, it's definitely a part of my small altcoin stack as far as things that could do well over the long term. It's emerged from its chrysalis cocoon below the 3-day cloud here. So it does look okay. And then there are a few, you know, lending and borrowing. I talked about AAVE, looks pretty good. It's above the 3-day cloud. anything that looks like this, that's breaking above diagonal resistance, has a pseudo pattern on its side, doesn't look like this chart, right? That's breaking down. It's breaking up instead of down. To me, that's what I like. I like strength over weakness, especially as a long-term cycle play. I'm not allocating heavily to it. I'm probably not even exiting at the target here, 130. Just going to hold this probably till, 2025, but that's my style. I hold things extremely long through the cycles. Another similar version of that chart is SNX. I would definitely watch for that 3-day cloud breakout or diagonal, whichever you prefer. It does look decent. And then there's something like, ADA, where not quite above the daily, the 3-day cloud, not quite completing any patterns here, trying to complete Adam and Eve's. It's trying to go up. Definitely not its moment, when it's above 31, 32, sure. But that's going to take some time, and we're not quite there yet. So definitely expect charts that look like this to continue to bleed against BTC. And if we look at some layer ones here that we didn't talk about, Ripple, I don't know what else to say other than it's really a non-existent chart in my mind. Just has nothing going for it. DOT seems to have bounced quite a bit here. In retrospect, maybe had a bull div going for it. It's just hard to know when we're literally making all-time lows effectively, or at least trying to. And sure, you've got a div, but that div can go on and on and on and on. And this may break down, right? The div will break up and then it'll break down anyway. So not a long-term play for me. Doesn't look like it has enough strength in the moment. LTC, we talked about this multi-year diag that so far has held. We'll see if that continues to hold. Hanging on by the hair of its chinny chin chin, it did bounce. So really can thank Bitcoin for that. Not anything on Litecoin's end. No fundamentals or reason as to why that thing went up. Take a look at AVAX here, similar to DOT. If DOT and AVAX start to do well, the entire market is probably getting an injection of liquidity. AVAX does have a bit of a W or something going on for it. Didn't quite make it to supremely oversold territory, but it did have, again, a little bit of a div, right? It had lower lows in price on less momentum. I just don't know what you do with this. Do you hold this for a 2x? Do you hold this till 16? Do you hold this till the diagonal resistance? Do you hold this till the 200-day moving average? I just think it needs to repair a lot of what happened over the previous 12 months before anything real happens. It's much easier to pick out something on Link that has a clear horizontal resistance. Everybody knows it's there, right? Whereas here, it's kind of like, what are we looking at? Are we looking at some other horizontal, some other diagonal, 15, 10? I don't know. Anyway, it's just kind of a mess. It's hard for the market to get a read on that from a chart perspective, I think. That's going to take some time. Tron continues to look good. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? I don't want to use the M word. I don't want to use the manipulation word. I'll just leave it at that. But Tron looks good blindly from a chart perspective. Continues to make highs. Looks pretty okay relative to a lot of these alts. I guess we'll take a look at Algo. Some of these lower tier alts finally bouncing on divergences, I guess. You could say, look, Josh, this is the bottom of Algo. This is a decent bet. It's been down only for 3 years or however long it's been. Maybe this is a 2x. Sure. But, that's not for me, but I can be down with the argument, at least. Matic did have quite a bit of a bounce as well. Kind of similar W double bottom to all these charts. But again, where do you go? You can measure the high to the low on the range for Matic. Look at some 50% level. We can talk about psychological resistance at $1. All perfectly reasonable and viable, but I think you're just wasting time and attention trying to trade this versus just taking the easier trade on Bitcoin, personally. EOS, why not? Let's take a look. Nobody talks about this. I look at crypto and read crypto stuff all day long. There's zero people talking about EOS. It kind of looks like ETH, to be honest, that structure, but it looks like all the lower cap coins that have bounced a little bit. On the DeFi side, Uni probably bounced as well, and it did. It's kind of still at that breakdown level. I just don't know what you do with this because it's got so much choppy history baggage behind it. right, that it needs to figure out first before the market really knows what to do with that. DYDX, nice little move up there. As volumes start to come back into exchanges, if they do, over a longer period of time, you may see exchange coins start to do better. You'll see DeFi gambling coins effectively do better. You know, something like DYDX that has perpetual or options or whatever it is, right? Those may also start to do better. So definitely a sector worth watching and worth keeping an eye on. Comp, choppy range mess, you know, ultimately until this is back above 60, I think it's an ignore. Curve was at that 40-cent level, bounced nicely, but again, it's got so much baggage back here to contend with. I really don't like this thing until it's probably above 80, honestly. Maybe you could trade this as a double bottom or something, I don't know, but really just not for me. Just needs a lot of repair first. And let's check out Doge, because somebody was asking me about Doge. If there's any coin that can thank Bitcoin, it's Doge, because that thing was on the verge of absolutely breaking down. Has bounced pretty decently, still remains in its descending triangle, right? So really just not a lot going on aside from like maybe the 5 coins that are showing some life. Everything else is still very much range bound, waiting to break out of mainly diagonals, which can be messy. And we'll look at Monero here real quick as well. 169 for me is the level, the pay attention level. So this is range bound. You know, if anything, this looks probably the closest to Link. It's got a pretty clear-ish horizontal range. But again, the problem with Monero, I say this every video, it's just not widely traded, so it's going to have a hard time breaking out. Not a lot of people have access to it. Anyway, that's all for this one. Join me tomorrow for a live stream that I do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.